We always hear that you should diversify your investment portfolio because it reduces risk and increases your chances of doing well. So this leads on to the question of how diversified should your portfolio be and how many stocks or ETFs should you actually own? I'm going to be discussing this idea of diversification and whether picking individual stocks over ETFs and index funds is actually best. I'm sorry if the audio on this video isn't great. There's currently a red weather warning where I live in the UK and the winds are absolutely awful at the moment, and I'm sat right next to the window. The wind's really bad. Okay, I don't know if you can hear that. Pretty sure all my plants on my balcony have gone flying off. I'm not a qualified financial advisor, so please do not take what I say in this video as professional financial advice. Okay, so the first thing to say is that for the majority of people, a diversified portfolio will be best. However, anyone that tells you that a diversified portfolio is for everyone is just wrong. How many stocks you own in your portfolio and consequently how diversified your portfolio is really subjective and really depends on a few things. It's an individual decision based on your personal situation. So you need to think about things such as your risk appetite, your age, your income, your skill set, the time that you have to commit to actively managing a portfolio and so on. So let's talk about those things. Someone who is quite young and has a high disposable income, so they can afford to invest a lot of money each month into investments, and they're quite young, so if it goes wrong, they have time to recover. This sort of person could actually have a non-diversified portfolio. They could throw all of their money into just 2 stocks. They could spend time researching these stocks and get a high conviction for the companies that they're investing in and put their money in those companies. Because of these key factors, they're young, they have time to recover, they have a high disposable income, meaning if it goes wrong, they can just get that disposable income again next month and put it into a different set of stocks. And also they have the time to research the companies, these 2 companies, for example, that they're going to invest in. But this strategy may not be very good for someone who is earning a moderate amount but has perhaps 3 kids and a mortgage and just doesn't have the time to research the companies. It wouldn't really make sense, this type of person throwing all of their hard-earned money that they're not going to come into for a good amount of time into just 2 stocks that they don't really have time to research and they don't really know much about. For this sort of investor, it may be better that they actually just put that money into something more stable, something like an index fund, an ETF, especially if this person is quite risk adverse as well. This person actually may see more benefit in actually upskilling themselves so that they have a higher disposable income to play around with and to invest, but I think that's a topic for a whole different video. So this idea of risk appetite, it plays a really big factor, a really big role in how diversified your portfolio is and perhaps how diversified your portfolio should be. If you made a decent salary but nothing crazy and you had about £5,000 at the end of the year to invest and you decided to put that £5,000 into 2 stocks, 2 stocks that you thought were good but you didn't know too much about. Besides, even if you did know about them, let's say you put them into these 2 stocks, this £5,000. And let's say that one of these stocks did appalling, really bad, really into the negative, really didn't perform very well at all. That's going to affect you. That's going to make you really quite sad, I should imagine, because your overall returns on your portfolio consisting of just 2 stocks with your £5,000 is going to be really bad. And potentially you're going to have to wait for a whole extra year before you can come across £5,000 again to actually make an investment. But let's now say you're quite a high earner and for whatever reason you have £40,000 per year that you can invest with. If you then put the same £5,000 into 2 stocks and one of them did really badly, it's probably not really going to matter too much to you. You're probably not really going to be too sad, and that's because you still have £35,000 to actually invest into. So it's this whole idea of risk appetite, and that's really closely linked to the type of person that you are, whether you're risk adverse or not, but also your situation, your financial situation that you're in. So I think it's important just to take a couple of minutes to talk about what diversification actually means in terms of an investment portfolio. So you can be diversified by geography, so location of the companies that you're investing in and what sort of markets you are investing in around the world. So that could be you're investing in the US market, the UK market, some emerging markets, all different developed markets and so on. You can be globally diversified. You can also be diversified in the industries that you invest in, and also going on from that, the specific sectors that you invest in. So you could invest in the healthcare sector, consumer goods, and then as a result of consumer goods, you could invest into lots of different consumer goods sectors. And that's a way to be diversified. You can also be diversified in the actual size of the companies that you invest in. So this is market capitalization. You can invest in small cap companies, mid cap companies, large cap companies. They all too have their own risks, because typically a small cap company is more likely to see higher growth, but it's also more likely to be very volatile. Whereas a large cap company, so these big or the mega cap companies even, they tend to give you quite stable returns, but you're less likely to see that really explosive growth that you would be in a small cap company. And the argument for being diversified comes down to reducing your risk again. So if you invest into a global portfolio, so you have a global portfolio, if your US stocks or your US ETF does really well one year, but your UK one does really poorly, it's going to balance out. And again, if, for example, you invest into the healthcare industry and the tech industry, and the healthcare industry does really poorly, then it's more likely that one of the other industries that you invest into, like the tech one, will do really well. So it will balance out your portfolio again. And this sort of strategy could lead to quite an average return, so a market return of the 8% that you're expecting, or perhaps quite a good return, maybe more like 9-10%. But it's kind of unlikely that by being really, really diversified, you are going to see returns of, let's say, 50%. You could, I'm not saying you can't, but just on average. I guess there's a bit of a counter argument to this, and that is that there's no point in putting your money into different sectors or different companies just for the sake of diversifying if you really truly believe that your money is going to see better returns elsewhere. So we've spoken a little bit about risk appetite, and how that fits into having or not having a diversified portfolio. The next thing to talk about is the idea of time. And time ties in with this idea of skill set that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. How much free time that you have and how skilled that you are, or how skilled you're willing to become, can really dictate how your portfolio should be and how many stocks you should have in your portfolio, whether you should actively manage your portfolio or passively have a more passive portfolio. Is whole idea of time and skill. If you decide that you're going to invest in 30 different stocks, so you're going to have 30 different companies in your investment portfolio, then I think the first thing that you should ask yourself is, do I have time to actually keep track of all of these companies, how they're performing, and do I have time to do the initial upfront analysis of these companies and whether I should invest into them, whether they're going to be a good purchase to have in my portfolio or not. And I think diversifying is good. In general, it's a really good thing. But if you're going to diversify your portfolio and pick 50 different stocks, then at that point you may as well just pick an ETF that covers most of these stocks, or an index fund, and actually just let it do its thing and it be passive, rather than you actively having to keep up with all of these 50 different companies, how they're performing, all of their quarterly reports and so on. It can be really time consuming. For some people, they will want a hands-on and they will want an active approach to their investing. They will want to pick their stocks themselves, and they want to keep track of their own portfolio rather than having something passive like an index fund or an ETF. But how diversified their portfolio is and how many stocks they have in their portfolio really depends on how much time they have to commit to their portfolio, and also all of these factors that I discussed at the beginning of the video. Just to be transparent, I think I should now talk about how I diversify my portfolio and my opinion towards diversification. I guess my overarching opinion is that most people would be better off just trying to track the market, not trying to beat the market, and just putting their money into index funds and ETFs, myself included here. But there are a lot of investors that want to try and build their portfolio and pick their own stocks, myself included again. And although I am someone who has picked a few stocks and I like to learn about different companies, and it is a way for me to learn how to analyze stocks by actually physically investing in them and learning as I go, I still don't think that I'm the best investor by any means. I'm still very much a beginner, and no one really can beat the market every single time they try, I don't think. Some people are better than others, I know, but yeah, I don't think I'm someone that can beat the market every single time I invest. And for that reason, I still have my ETFs and my index funds. And then I have a few companies that I've analysed and I have a high conviction for. And I'm by no means perfect. I'm sure some of these investments will do really badly and that will teach me some lessons. But yeah, I still enjoy picking a few companies just to see what happens and because I like these companies. But basically what I should say is that I hold way more of my money in ETFs and index funds than I do in individual stocks. And I plan to continue doing that going forward because that is a way for me to hedge against my individual stock picking a little bit. And like I said, I only actually really invest into 3 companies that I think are going to do well and that I believe in. And then I have a few more experimental companies, but they don't really have much money at all in them. So that's more, for an experiment purpose, I suppose. I think if you're someone that doesn't have much time and is not really interested at all in learning about how to analyze companies, then that's fine. That shouldn't put you off investing whatsoever. But you should just get a collection of companies through an ETF or an index fund and just call it a day and put money into that. Track the market, be a stable investor like that, rather than trying to actually handpick companies because that comes with more risk in a lot of scenarios. And also you've got to kind of want to be analysing companies in order to actually get a good return. Otherwise it's kind of like gambling, I suppose. But yeah, I guess that really depends on your risk appetite again and your whole situation. I guess the thing with index funds and ETFs as well is everything's dealt with for you, like the rebalancing and everything. And if one company does really badly, likelihood is that it's not really going to affect your returns too much. Whereas, like I said earlier, if you put your money into just 5 stocks and each of them is 20% weighted in your portfolio, if one does badly or 2 do badly, then that's probably going to affect your entire portfolio way more than just if 1 out of your 500 holdings in an ETF did badly. And that can be too much for some investors. So it is a personal decision at the end of the day. Now, like I've said, for most people, a really diversified portfolio in terms of being globally diversified, having different cap sizes in there, having different industries represented is a really good thing. And most people should strive towards that. But just to, play devil's advocate here, and to get people thinking, leave your comments below. I think a non-diversified portfolio can actually be really beneficial in its own ways. So if you love, and I mean love, a particular company and you know everything about that company, like the ins and outs of their business model, all of their financials, and more importantly, you love what they do, you use the product or you use the service and you really see it being something that's going to grow in the future. If this is the case, then there's probably not much point in putting your money into companies or an ETF or something that you just don't really care about. You should instead probably put all of your money into something that you're really passionate about and lots about. For example, there's this guy, I think this is his name. I think his name's Jason DeBolt. I really hope that's right because I really like, I've watched a few of his interviews and I really like them. I'm probably going to tell his story wrong, but from what I read and what I've listened to, he had a good job. He had a lot of disposable income and he basically from the early days was putting a lot of money into Tesla. And when I say a lot, I mean like a lot of money. And at age 39, he was completely financially independent, quit his job and is now completely financially independent. I would say retired, but I suppose he's probably still doing things with his time in the sense of traditional retirement. He can now live off his Tesla stocks. That's incredible. And that's because of his conviction for Tesla. He really believed that company was going somewhere. He thought it was the future. And he stuck with it through times where the Tesla stock was plummeting and it really wasn't doing very well. Because, his opinion is that why would he put his money into things that he didn't really care about just for diversification when he could put it all into a company that he really wholeheartedly believed would do well. And it turned out really well for him. It turned out amazing for him actually. So yeah, definitely go and listen to his interview. I believe he did one with Dave Lee, who is another YouTuber I absolutely love. So check that out if you're interested. But yeah, there are situations where, like I said, if you're young and you have a high income and you've got a high conviction and you do the work, it makes sense to be less diversified, but for the average person, for the real average person, you should probably have a diversified portfolio. But it's open to interpretations, I suppose, whatever works for you and whatever you see fit for yourself and your circumstances. So just following on from the benefits of a non-diversified portfolio, I wanted just to briefly mention some of the risks of an over-diversified portfolio, just to give you both sides of the argument. You know, we've spoken about why diversification is really, really good. Now let's talk about why it may not be so good in some situations. I think the biggest risk of an over-diversified portfolio, so not a diversified one, an over-diversified portfolio, is that you actually reduce your chances of getting good returns. So you may see actually lower returns if your portfolio is too diversified. And even the likes of Warren Buffett and, you know, investors like that who are looked up to quite a lot in the investing world, They are people that advocate a diversified portfolio and ETFs and index funds for the average investor. But if you look at their portfolio, Warren Buffett in particular, he has got a very diversified portfolio. He's got lots and lots of different companies, lots of industries represented in his portfolio. But his top 5 holdings, so the companies that he has a really strong conviction for, still make up something like 80% of the entire weighting of the portfolio. So I think this goes to show you that you should have a diversified portfolio, but perhaps not to the level where you have 100 companies and each one of them represents 1% of your portfolio, because you're probably going to lean towards some industries more and some companies more, and you're going to have done more work towards them companies and researching about them. But on the flip side, you could just get an ETF and call it quits. So I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to ask for your opinions. Let me know in the comments below what your opinions on diversification is and how many stocks you should own in your portfolio, or whether you should just stick to ETFs and index funds. Yeah, if you've got any opinions, do let me know. And in the meantime, if you want to see how I'm going to be starting my own dividend portfolio very soon, then click here.